What do we get when we combine the Teletubbies, an Attenborough nature documentary, a penchant for eating worms by the dozen, and bloated infected zombies? Well, we're about to find out when we go deep and talk about 28 years later. I can't believe we're actually living at the point where there has been a sequel to this film. 28 Years Later is the first of a trilogy of sequels to the original 28 Days Later, and it's written by Alex Garland and directed by Danny Boyle. This is the combination that brought us the original 28 Days Later. Now, 28 Weeks Later is its own separate thing. It did have some very good scenes, some memorable scenes, like the chase scene everyone talks about, which was great with the soundtrack. However, it lacked a bit of the grittiness, the realism, and the originality of the first film, in my opinion. We're back here with the two who made this series, essentially. And I went into this film with such high expectations, and I'm very excited to tell you that in all places it surpassed these expectations. Overall filmmaking, writing, directing, acting performances, cinematography, everything here, soundtrack, everything surpassed my expectations. The premise is that a young boy, played by Alfie Williams, who does an incredible job here, I'll say. The premise is that this kid is just coming of age and he essentially is being given a trial, a coming of age trial, where he has to leave the safety of this small community on this island and he has to venture out to the mainland with his father, and it's almost like a coming of age trial. Now, this is, I mean, a very intense situation to be in, and later on he ventures out once again with a new adventure in mind and a new motivation, which helps with his character development. But that's the premise anyway. I don't want to spoil anything. I'll probably get to that in another video. The acting performances here are unparalleled. Jodie Comer has a scene early on in a bedroom where she almost has to just showcase various emotions at the same time because she has a confusion going on and has a bit of a brain fog. So she's almost showing different sides of her personality from one minute to the next. Alfie Williams here, playing the child, Spike. He gets to showcase a wide variety of emotions here, and he's very believable in the fact that he was born after the infection took hold. So he doesn't have a concept of what came before, history, and he doesn't have a concept of technology as it was. So there's no electricity, so he doesn't understand what online is, he doesn't know what a phone is, he doesn't know what a radio is. He hears stories, but he's never actually seen them working. He showcases this really well. Ralph Fiennes plays, in my opinion, one of the most intriguing characters in the whole film. A very eccentric guy who's obviously been isolated for probably too long. But there's an interesting dynamic where the brutality of this whole situation with the infected and the violence, he himself embodies the character of compassion. So he almost sees the infected and non-infected as just as important as each other, and that the death of one and the death of the other are just the same. He sees the infected as what they are, ill. They have an infection. They're not dead. They're not, you know, they may be without other thoughts and processes than attacking people and spreading infection, but at the end of the day, he probably feels that they can be cured. That, you know, they are ill. So finally, we come to Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays Spike's father, and he essentially is just the brave alpha male style survivalist. But there's a lot more to his character, and he is a very flawed character. very believable character. All of them coincide together well in this film, and the relationships and the dynamics between characters is all very believable. The dialogue is very believable, and the overall relations between characters in this film are just as good as I hoped they would be. I would say even an upgrade on 28 Days Later, where we had the main characters' relationship, but also they would come across strangers and then the relationships would develop. I think it's even more fleshed out here, and we have more films to carry that on. Now, in terms of cinematography, there are things that Danny Boyle has done here. We know in his films he obviously does unique things, unique spins on camera work and on visualizations, and one of the biggest things here is when the infected are on screen, whether they are having a contact, as in an injury, or a death scene. It's captured almost like there's 6 or 7 different angles at the same time, which are spliced together, and then frames are skipped. And this is a very interesting visual when you're watching it, because it's almost like, I think in the build-up to it, Danny Boyle said himself, it's almost like a budget slow motion. It has like a skipped frame pause almost as the, let's say for example, an arrow is hitting one of the infected. It almost freezes as soon as the contact is made. And the visual effect is striking, and it's also very original. So he's done something here which I haven't seen before. The sweeping shots of the forests and the small towns, the overall hilly landscapes, are nature documentary-esque, Attenborough-esque here. And even with the infected there, there's still a beauty in each of those shots. There are scenes on top of hills with trees that are silhouetted because of the sunset in the background, and they're just beautifully shot. Britain in certain lights, not all the time, because a lot of the time it's raining and it's quite grey and horrible, but like, for example, summer in Britain is fantastic, the landscape, the scenery, the countryside. Now, the storyline here is very well fleshed out, and I would say that the story is there in 28 Days Later, the original, but here it's much more fleshed out, and I would say it's a much more story-driven film than the previous two. And that's a great thing. And it also explains why there may be, why there is a trilogy. Because you're going to need a long time to explore all these characters, but also develop the storyline as it's going. But it was a very story-driven film. The soundtrack was something I probably didn't even imagine. It's not how I imagined it would be, but it works so well, particularly in chase scenes. And there are various themes going through here. Themes of compassion, as I said, but also of love between a father and son, a mother and son, the lengths you would go to protect a son, protect a mother, protect a stranger if they're in need. And the exposition here in this film, which we obviously need because 28 years have passed, is done so well. A character is introduced further down in the film who isn't familiar with the mainland or the infection in general, and he almost then acts as the audience. So the questions we might be asking about how certain things work in the UK when it's been quarantined, they are explored by this character. And there's an interesting, funny dynamic where he isn't really sure of what's going on in the UK because it's been quarantined, and the people in the UK don't know what's going on outside of it. So there's like a confusion between the two. And so there are very comedic scenes, and the audience were laughing, and I was laughing myself. I'll choose this point to also tell you that the people I was at the screening with don't particularly like horror films. They loved this film. And I think what it says to me is that you have, I mean, I'm a horror film fan, right? You have 90% of horror films, the genre, terrible. B movie style, terrible films, right? Then you have 10% which are good films, good horror films, rather. So you have terrible horror films, good horror films, and then you have good films. End of. This is a good film. You can take the genre, the horror genre tropes, you can park that elsewhere. This is a good film, standalone, on its own. You don't even have to say it's a good horror film, it's just a good film. It's a great horror film, and it's a great film on its own. Even if you're not a horror fan, you'll find moments to enjoy here. There are moments of desperation, fear, obviously, with it being a horror, but there are moments of genuine tragedy and emotion, driven also by the soundtrack, which is very fitting. There are also multiple moments of love, endearment, the extent you'll go for a fellow human being, particularly a family member. And all these things come in, as I say, the compassion of Dr. Kelson, which is Ray Fiennes' character, it's palpable. It makes you really think maybe, your faith in humanity is restored because there is faith in humanity here. He almost embodies that feeling. And it really gives a sense of hope in what should be a hopeless situation. You're quarantined, you have, a very low quality of life, and you're living day to day. But there are moments where spliced imagery of historical moments and, similar things that are happening on screen that have happened elsewhere are all spliced together, and it just gives that sense of a connection, human connection. We haven't, the things we've endured as a human race have not been lost to time. They're all there. People still think about them. They still apply. The human race has been through so many things, so many heartbreaking, horrible situations, and people find a way. And I think that's one of the biggest things to take away from this film, the positivity, the hope, the love, and the endurance of the human race. It's all there, and I couldn't have been happier with this film. I can't wait for the second. I'm going to watch the first one again tomorrow, I think, or the day after. It's the weekend now. I really, really had fun with this film. I can't stop thinking about it. I need to watch it again. You should go watch it, get it done. The second film's already been shot. That will be airing in January, I think. The third film is waiting for its budget, but I'm sure with the success of the first film alone, let alone with the second film, it's basically a given that the third film will happen. And I'm very interested to see where this goes. So make sure you go and watch it. This has been one of my favourite films for a very long time, and it's certainly up there in top 3 horror movies of all time. I'll see you later.